Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. I am your host, hosting the show and enjoying it every single show. So glad you joined us. Today we're going to talk, we think about success, and so many things go with that, challenges, all those things. But today we're going to talk about communicating, and I'm going to do my best to communicate some ideas to you about communication and about public speaking, sometimes on the radio, but in a general sense. So I'm not going to be exhaustive here. I'm not going to be able to cover every single nuance to this. However, I'm going to touch on some important points that have served me, have served others, and I think will serve you if you do some of these things or keep them in mind as you communicate, whether it's one-on-one or whether you're speaking to 10 people, 20 people, or 1,000. It doesn't matter. Some of these principles, I think, will help you very well, as they've helped me and others. It was about 40-some years ago, 50 years ago even, in a little town in Pennsylvania. There was a guy named Ed the Barber, and this town is Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Many of you may know it. It's across the river from the capital of Pennsylvania, that is Harrisburg, a little place called Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, a Norman Rockwell-ish sort of town. It had a market street, and on that market street was a center of activity where you had the local barber shop, Ed's Barber Shop. Across the street, there was the movie theater and even the corner drugstore. So it was a very nice little town, rolling hills, and Ed's Barber Shop looked like it was out of a Norman Rockwell picture. And that was one of my first jobs. I was just a little lad of about 11 years old. That was one of my first jobs, and I worked at the barber shop. I would straighten the magazines. I would sweep the hair. And back then, they were smoking. I would empty the ashtrays and take the trash out. But most of all, I learned an important business lesson. I learned why people went to Ed's barbershop. Ed did a great job at exceeding expectations, and he was a storyteller. In fact, as I noticed Ed back then and learned from him, what he would do is he knew when to talk to his customers, and people there would always be at least more than one person in the barbershop. He was cutting someone's hair. There were people waiting, and sometimes people just dropped by to say hello or listen to some of his stories or talk with Ed. So he was a great communicator. He was telling stories, and again, he knew when to listen as well. However, as he was there, he's exceeding expectations, and I learned that people like to do business with Ed the Barber because they liked him. So what he would do, he would talk with people, cut their hair, and at the end of the haircut, I think the haircut at the time was about $1.25. And when the person gave Ed the money, he would go to the cash register, and instead of receiving a tip, he would go back to the customer and give him a quarter back. He would exceed expectations. So in a small way, Ed built a very successful business, and he was a hunter and a fisherman, so he had a lot of things to talk about. However, he knew how to communicate with people. He was there to tell a story, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today is telling the story. In fact, there's several books I'll reference, and the thing that comes into play, whatever your profession, let's say I know a lot of realtors listen to this show, attorneys, however, whatever it is in life, when we tell a better story, we become successful. We become successful at getting our point across, just like, again, at that attorney, yeah, there's facts, there's figures. However, it's the one that tells a better story. Usually in the real estate profession, let's say you have a real estate listing and you're there at a listing appointment trying to get the listing. If you're the person that tells that better story, you're the person that gets the listing. Certainly you have to have your facts and figures, even have a track record. But getting that communication across is so important. And I'm going to talk about that in some detail coming up. So as far as speaking, again, going to the idea, Ed, with the 2, 3, 5 people that were in the barbershop, he was in the public speaking world. So whether you're speaking to 2 or more, we'll call that public speaking. And I will tell you, these tips will help you even on one-on-one conversation. I will I'll also say, as have had the opportunity to be on the radio on 2 shows, this show and then Real Estate Matters that comes on at 1 o'clock today on this same station, I've had the opportunity to really watch what I say. I make mistakes all the time. However, I'm constantly trying to hone my public speaking skills. And I find that when speaking in public, it helps me even with one-on-one conversation. So the idea of public speaking. Some people are afraid of public speaking. It's one of the top things people are most fearful of. And I will tell you, at whatever stage of life you are in or whatever age you are, if you're a youngster, a teenager listening, a college student, or someone 50, 60 years old, it doesn't matter. Get over the fear of public speaking. You will do so much better in life. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll get your communication and your story across. So if you have that fear, take heart. A lot of people do also. However, work on it. Use opportunities to rise to the occasion and challenge yourself and take public speaking opportunities, even if it's for 10 people or giving a toast at a wedding, whatever it may be. Practice, and then you will overcome that fear. You'll enjoy it. So get out of the idea of fear. Move on, and life is just too short to be fearful of things that really, really can't hurt you, like public speaking. So look for those opportunities. In fact, in the real estate world, as I'm in that, I'm amazed at the amount of real estate professionals that are out there that are afraid to speak before groups. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm talking about even people that have their names on the brokerages. They shy away from opportunities to talk about their business, to promote their business. So very important. Get over the fear. Now, the other idea is our words. When we speak to people, and you can hear not just this radio show, but as you hear different radio shows, you hear sometimes the host, sometimes you hear people that call in. The first thing I'm going to talk about is words not to use. And those words not to use are, we hear it all the time, words like, those are things that are said to help us buy time as we develop our thoughts as we're talking to someone. Better not to say anything than to say ahs, you knows, and things like that. That's just not good. So practice that. And the best thing to do, if you don't remember anything else from this show, if you want to be a better speaker, whatever your role is, even if your role is a parent, I would suggest record. This is the most important thing. Record yourself. And I'm not talking about recording like we are here today on the radio. I'm saying record yourself with whatever smartphone you have. I have an iPhone, and I use an app called Quick Voice Pro. It is a tremendous app to where I could just set anytime I have a presentation, whether it's 3 minutes or 10 minutes or half hour. Certainly these radio shows I record are being recorded, so I can go back and listen. And by recording, I will hear things that I say, hey, that worked out pretty good, or I forgot to say something, or perhaps I've overused a word, or I may have even used some of the vocal fillers like ahs, ums, and you knows. I really try not to do that. However, recording lets us know how we sound and what we are saying and what we're not saying. In fact, how we sound. Some people say, well, I don't want to record myself because I don't like the way I sound. Oh, my voice is too nasal, or something like that. Well, let me tell you, I'm not saying talk like someone you're not or be artificial. However, I am saying that we have the opportunity to sound better, improve the way we sound. And that's done just like singers, where breathing is so important. Even the best of singers go to vocal coaches. And some of the things they work on, as far as singers go, they work on the breathing. Also, by breathing the tone. So by recording yourself, you can listen how you sound. If you're not happy with the way you sound, and we're talking about how we sound, words we say, words we don't say, but when we think about how we sound, we do have the ability to control that to some degree. I mean, if you have a nasal sound, you can control that. Bring the air from your lungs. Breathe. Take a deep breath. So the way we sound is important too. So right there, record yourself. That is one of the biggest things that will help you improve your communication. Again, whether it's one person to 1,000, record yourself. And again, get that. There's many apps. I like Quick Voice Pro because I could set the iPhone down, press Quick Voice Pro, and just talk. And I can go back to that and then listen. And the recording quality is surprisingly very, very good. Quick Voice Pro, get that on your phone and record yourself. Next time you give a presentation Or you may even be on a phone call. You can record your end of the phone call and listen to how you sounded and how well you communicated or not. Vocal filler. So going back to the ahs, ums, and you knows, I want to reference a person that has some great videos on communication, but she does a spectacular job talking about the vocal fillers. Her name is Alexa Fisher. I think her website is alexafisher.com. However, you can go to her YouTube channel, which is Alexa Fisher YouTube channel, and you can hear some of the things she talks about in communications and also with interacting with people. And her website, again, is alexafisher.com. But she is a great resource. So when we talk about our content, what do we want to say? What are the things that we want to bring forth to people? In fact, many of you know the Talk Like Ted, or there's a book called Talk Like Ted is what I'm trying to say. There you go, great communicator right here. But the TED Talks, but there's a book called Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo. It's written a few years ago, and what he did, all these TED Talks get a lot of views, and in the earlier days, I think this was 4 or 5 years ago. However, he took one of the most famous talks at the time. He talks about it in this book, and he says that it had millions of hits on their website. And he said, what is it about this particular talk that really struck with these people? And in fact, the guy that talked on this subject that he was analyzing also gained millions of dollars in donations from this particular talk. So this guy, Carmine Gallo, who wrote the book Talk Like Ted, looked at it and said, I'm going to analyze this. So he took the guy's speech, and the TED Talks are very scientific. They're very done with a process and a formula. I think they're 20-some minutes, and it's just a great amount of time for people to listen, and also the right amount of time to get a lot of content out there. So he analyzed it word for word, and it was our good friend many years ago. He attributed 3 things. It was Aristotle that said, in persuading, that there's 3 things that take place: logos, ethos, and pathos. And those 3 things are taking place when we touch somebody and persuade someone, or get our point across, is another way to put it, or get our story across. Logos is the idea of logic. When we're influenced by someone that is logical, for example, they may be logical, or they say, look, take a real estate professional. Well, this home is like the others that I've sold at this price point. It took this long to sell in this marketplace. Logic. All these points are put together. If we do this, this is going to happen because of past history. Logic. So that's a thing that persuades people. That's a thing that influences people. Another thing is ethos. That's our credibility. So, for example, if Brad Pitt gets up and talks about acting, or Michael Jordan talks about basketball, all of a sudden we're saying, look, yeah, this person really knows what they're talking about because they've been successful. They have the ethos, and that's going to persuade us as well. That's very important. And what happens in reality is it's a combination of 3 things. The third thing is pathos. When we're persuaded by emotion, again, that idea of the story, pathos, the emotion, the connecting with people. Well, going back to Carmine Gallo, when he examined this famous TED Talk, or this very popular TED Talk, he looked at each word and he attributed one of these components, a word that lent itself to a logic, emotion, or the credibility. And he found that in this famous TED Talk, about 60 to 70% was pathos, words that related to emotion, words that touched and reached out to people and connected. So the point being is, going back to the idea of the story, it is about emotion. It's about touching people. A story, telling them a story in a way that it connects and gets our point across. Very interesting, isn't it? Think about how you have been, or I've been persuaded in life many times. It's that connection where someone touched something that I related to, or that you related to, telling a better story. And keep this in mind. It's that story, going back to Ed the barber. He was building his business one person at a time, and this barber shop with sales that averaged $1.25, but he was building the business one person at a time and telling his story. Basic point, but it works in all the areas of life. It works with our children, getting them to know and learn the right thing. Think of the books that are written by children or for children, and they have morals. They have stories to it. So very interesting. Ethos, pathos, logos, that pathos, connecting with people. There's another book I want to reference. So the first book is Talk Like Ted. Check it out, Carmine Gallo. The next book is by Tim Pollard. He is with a company called Oratium, and his book is called The Compelling Communicator. He takes the idea of storytelling, and think about this. And I had the opportunity to interview Tim Pollard. In fact, we're setting that up again for him to come up here perhaps in the next month or two. Tim Pollard, The Compelling Communicator. Great stuff there. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit before I talk about Tim's book, The Compelling Communicator, but he talks also about the idea of telling a story. And it was interesting, before I talked to Tim on the interview, maybe 6 months ago or so, I had the opportunity to watch the Netflix series called The People versus O.J., and that was a 10-episode series where it was a fantastic. Now, I lived in the time of the O.J. Simpson trial. Many of you remember, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And as they say, truth is stranger than fiction. And it was very interesting as that thing played out for years and influenced so many lives. However, in the Netflix special or series, the People versus O.J., it was absolutely fascinating, as you had John Travolta play Robert Shapiro, Courtney Vance played Johnny Cochran, every actor, Cuba Gooding Jr. played O.J., every actor and actress in that show was spectacular. However, it was so well done. But here's the idea. There was one of the scene where Johnny Cochran's team gets the O.J. case. They were so happy they were so excited to get it. And there was the episode, I don't know if it was maybe 3 or 4 episodes in, but Courtney Vance, playing Johnny Cochran, sits at the table with his associates, and they've done all the research. There's mounds of papers and stacks of papers of evidence and things like that on the desk. And his associates are saying, Johnny, we've analyzed this. We've got all the facts. We see the DNA. The evidence goes from Rockingham to the Bronco to this and that. And Johnny stops and he says, look, we're here to tell a better story. And that's what I'm saying here to you today. Now, there's no doubt Johnny Cochran told a better story. And quite frankly, in addition to telling a better story, that series and analyzing it from the sales and business end, if you watch the Netflix special, again, The People versus O.J., that was a tale, the way it was portrayed on Netflix, of winners and losers. When you put winners together, regardless of what's right or wrong, regardless whether you think O.J. was guilty or innocent, doesn't matter. As far as a story and a case study of winners or losers, when you put Johnny Cochran, Robert Shapiro, F. Lee Bailey, gigantic egos, even at times clashing throughout the trial, they were winners. They were there to win, and they did. They told a better story. In fact, as we think of that idea of telling a better story, if you remember, and going back to all the facts and figures, there were 9 months of in fact, going back to Tim Pollard, as in his book, The Compelling Communicator, when I talked to him on the interview months back, and I referenced the O.J. and how telling the story and the line from the show that Courtney Vance said as Johnny Cochran. But when I mentioned that to Tim, he says that is exactly right. He says there were 9 months of mind-numbing testimony, but it was that people remembered those famous words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Now, very interesting, isn't it? In fact, Tim goes further. In his book, he analyzes getting our message across in The Compelling Communicator by Tim Pollard. He says it's antithetical. I think that's the word. There's some reason people remember that more. If it doesn't, you must. Going back to a famous president, ask not what your country can do, but what you can do. Again, that antithetical. Going back even further, to be or not to be. So many things to think about in the way we communicate. So going back and getting on a different tack, going back to Ed the Barber, back in Pennsylvania, one of my first jobs, it was a great business lesson. He built his business one person at a time. In fact, I'll even say he built his business one story at a time. Ed the Barber. Ed, if you're still out there in Pennsylvania, I thank you for one of my first jobs at age 11. Now, I'm much older than that today. But so many great resources for us out there in communicating. So think about that. Again, the book, Talk Like Ted, Carmine Gallo. Go to alexafisher.com. She has great stuff on YouTube and on her website. I think she has a podcast called The 1,000-Watt Presence. And, of course, really excited to think about having Tim Pollard on the show coming up here in a few weeks, hopefully. His book, I would strongly recommend, is the book called The Compelling Communicator. And don't forget, one of the biggest things that you can do to be a better speaker, to be a better communicator in any sense, whether it's for your communicating with your children, to a large audience, a real estate presentation, whatever it is, that is to tell a better story. I'm talking about being factual, being honest, but to tell that story that relates. For example, going back to the real estate application, you might be the realtor and you're talking to someone and they're trying to sell, they want to sell their house. They think that you might be the agent for them, but you might say, look, we've had a home just like this. And I remember what we did. You're touching them. You're telling them a story, how it relates to them. And we sold the home for more than we thought we would, or it took us this amount of time, or we addressed this challenge. But you tell a story. So important. And I would encourage you to check out our show, Real Estate Matters with Stuart Title. That's coming up at 1 o'clock. We're going to talk about real estate, and you can always go to the show archives. This show, Successful Living, is on Bill Napick radio shows. That's K-N-A-P-I-K. The K is silent. I don't know why it's silent, but it is. Bill Napick radio shows. Many shows there, both the Real Estate Show and Successful Living, where we've had great guests all the time. In fact, Nelson DeMille's, his book is now on the bestsellers list. We talked to him a few weeks ago. So until next week, go to Bill Napick radio shows. Check out Real Estate Matters here at 1 o'clock today. And until then, remember, tell a better story and record yourself. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Till next week. Bye-bye.
How many times must I tell you, baby? How many bridges I got to cross? How many times must I explain myself? Or I can talk to the boss. Or I can talk to the boss.
When it comes to real estate, everything matters. Whether you're a realtor, homeowner, buyer, or seller, Real Estate Matters with Stuart Title is here to inform, entertain, and inspire you. Host Bill Napick from Stuart Title will talk with guests about what really matters when it comes to owning, buying, and selling real estate. Learn what really matters when it comes to real estate. Listen to Real Estate Matters, Saturdays at 1 p.m. on 100.7 The Word, KKHT. That's Real Estate Matters, Saturdays at 1 p.m. on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.